What's going on, YouTube? This is the NCU podcast. I am your host, Noel. Today we're doing a shorter one. I seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 yesterday. I am doing this episode, at least this part right now, solo. And I want to give a non-spoiler breakdown for the people that have not seen the movie yet. If you guys don't mind, please liking the video, sharing it with your friends, commenting, and hitting the notification bell. Without further ado, let's get it started. So, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Personally, let's get it right off the bat. I feel like it was a really, really good movie. Considering the trend of Marvel movies recently, with everything being super, super goofy and not really making much sense, or one thing I've complained about the most is having these big villains that almost amount to nothing, if that makes sense. Like we had in Thor Love and Thunder, we had what's his name? Gore the God Butcher. There we go. We had Gore the God Butcher, who comic book wise, it took three different variations of Thor all fighting together to even have a chance against him. And he amounted to virtually nothing. And it was very, very frustrating as someone that's not only a fan of the MCU, but also a fan of Marvel Comics as a whole. Now, this movie, High Evolutionary, let's get into the pros and cons. We'll start off with that. We'll get into the pros and cons of each person's performance. Now, everybody in the cast of the actual Guardians of the Galaxy, the main cast, Star-Lord, Nebula, Rocket Group, Mantis, they were phenomenal. What Marvel did, I believe James Gunn, who directed this movie before he left for DC, what they did in this movie was spot on. The writing was good. The writing was actually really, really good because it dealt with a lot of trauma and insecurities of each character, and it didn't spend way too much time on each person except for maybe Star-Lord, which I will talk about later. But it literally broke each character down with a certain scene or a certain couple of scenes, and it showed that right now the Guardians were a little bit dysfunctional. I truly enjoyed that. I enjoyed Mantis's, or Palm, I believe her name is Palm Clementif. Her performance and her minor comedy, especially when she's like partnered with Dave Bautista's Drax, is always a good time. And Mantis had more comedy where it wasn't her saying something; it was just something that happened in the background that she was a part of that made things so much funnier. Cosmo the Space Dog, I was surprised that Cosmo would be in there, voiced by Maria Bakalova. I'm sorry if I butcher your name if you ever do see this, but her performance as Cosmo was great as well, even though she had very, very little lines. And the lines that she did was, of course, aimed towards the kids and aimed towards a little bit of the comedy. Though I feel like Cosmos didn't stick that well. But let me get more so back into the positives before I get into negatives. Chukwudi Iwuji, hopefully I didn't butcher that name either. His High Evolutionary character, I would say, is one of the best Marvel villain portrayals of the recent Marvel villains in the films. And when I say that, again, non-spoiler, the High Evolutionary in this movie was a villain, was a straight up villain. There was not a moment in time where I sat back and looked at the High Evolutionary and said, he's a villain, but he might be one of those characters that, he's just having a bad day and he's just trying to do this for like the goodness of his family, or he is the definition of a God complex. He is the definition of evil and chaos. you will go into that movie, and please, if anybody's going to see it, hopefully this weekend, you will go into that movie not thinking, oh, maybe I can sympathize with him. It wasn't like Gore in Love and Thunder where he, if you haven't seen that, and this is a spoiler, but it wasn't like Gore from Love and Thunder where you seen that Gore had a child and oh, that's the reason why everything was like he went into his villain role. It wasn't like Kang in Ant-Man movie where Kang got kicked out by the other Kang variants and now it's like I just want to take back, I want to get back and do this and do that. I'm the only person that can fix the time. No, this was yes, this High Evolutionary was a villain. Was a pure villain and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Some of his lines in the movie would have you sit back and say, "Oh, wow!" And especially let's say leading onto that God complex, you will realize that this man was crazy, and he didn't need any crazy flashy powers. Like it wasn't a situation where he needed to, like I don't know, lift up a building with one hand. By the way, he didn't do that. Just letting you know, but he didn't need to lift up a building with one hand, or he didn't need to like freeze time or do something like that. His powers in the movie were very simplistic and just using them. And he wasn't even really needing to use his power because, again, with having that God complex, he sat there and said, well, I'm going to have my cronies do all my work. Nevertheless, Bradley Cooper's Rocket. I love the way that Marvel fleshed out this story. I thoroughly did. Because getting Rocket's actual backstory, like, I'm glad they kind of split it up into sections where the guards are doing this and then they show Rocket and then it's like a small flashback to Rocket's past, like how Rocket became Rocket. Because for all that's being known, especially trailer wise, the High Evolutionary made Rocket. So you're going to understand how Rocket became who Rocket is, how the High Evolutionary did everything, and why the High Evolutionary is in this, like, why the High Evolutionary is the big bad of this movie, per se. Sylvester Stallone came back and reprised his role as the Ravager. Gamora, I like Gamora. Like I like Gamora in this movie. It was more so we had Gamora in this mindset of, I'm not the Gamora from your original one, your original universe, especially, or more so original timeline, especially because obviously in Endgame, well, actually in Infinity War, Thanos killed Gamora, and in Endgame, the new, or at least the past Gamora came into the future. So, role was good. Kraglin, after taking up Yondu's role from Guardians 2, especially we seen at the end of Guardians 2 that Kraglin took the I want to say like the Mohawk, the one that where he's able to whistle and control like the sharp arrow and everything. He's learning how to do that. Really, really good. Had some funny moments. Had some okay funny moments with Cosmo the dog, the space dog, and yeah, Linda Cardellini. I probably said that name wrong too. Her voicing the otter, which is named Lila. You probably seen Rocket and Lila the otter hug each other in the trailer. She did phenomenal as well. This was one of those things where she made you feel true. She made you real. Her and Bradley Cooper pairing together made you feel real emotion, like real love, real sadness, just real shock. I sat back and just was wondering what's going on, what's going to happen. I was, of course, walking in, considering the trailers, looking at it as, oh, this is obviously Rocket's love interest, and, this is what they're going to do. They're going to set up this movie where Mantis and Drax are together, and because they've seen that they was trying to, pair them for a minute, but Mantis and Drax are together, and then Star Lord gets Gamora back, and now Rocket has a love interest, and now we're gonna find Nebula someone in Groot. Like, it was none of that. It was literally just a movie based on the Guardians, with of course these aspects in it, but still something that was really that came out really really great. So I went with some friends. Some of them said that this was the best Guardians movie. I of course say this is arguably in the top 3 to 5 of the new and current Marvel movies. And I'm saying new and current, saying past. I believe we're starting with Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi Eternals around that aspect. So past Black Widow and past Spider-Man Far From Home. So that's the positives, I believe. Now let's get into some of the negatives. Now, one of the biggest things that I was really, really gung ho looking for was Will Poulter's Adam Warlock. Considering Adam Warlock had to play in the comics, had to play a role when it came to the Infinity Saga, like dealing with the Infinity Gauntlet and everything. So seeing that they're finally gonna put Adam Warlock in the movie, I'm like, yes, 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 and they somewhat, actually not really somewhat, they kind of portrayed him in a, let's say, lovable kid role, like kind of making, not really making jokes, but just kind of having like some goofball moments. And they showed that Adam Warlock was powerful, but they really, really had some goofball moments, and they explain it. I'm not going to obviously explain it, because again, this is a non-spoiler review, but he has some goofball moments, and I personally wasn't the biggest fan of it. When they showed Adam Warlock and Adam Warlock fighting, then Adam Warlock was mean to business. Adam Warlock is very powerful, but when it wasn't Adam Warlock fighting, it was just kind of like a really lot of let's get, we're Marvel and Disney. We gotta have the kids get a couple laughs, and we gotta have the kids say, I like this character and whatnot. So that's one of the cons. Another con I would say is when they were talking about Peter and Gamora, well, if people don't know, Star Lord and Gamora, they really did really go heavy into Star Lord trying to win Gamora back over. And I wasn't the best fan of that. And I'm not saying, because I understood, of course, everybody understood like how much Star Lord meant to, or how much Gamora meant to Star Lord. But the thing was, it seemed, some of it, of course, seemed forced for comedic sake. Like, it'll be a situation, and I'm going to give a random example, not one from the movie. It'll be an example of literally they're on a planet full of peaceful aliens, and he sits back and he decides, oh, he's going to not only go pick up some flowers, but he's going to accidentally find a way to trip Gamora and then catch her with the flowers in the hand and being like, oh, I remember this as the first time we met each other. And it's like, you didn't have to do that. Like, I get it, but at the same time, some of the moments where he was trying to win Gamora back over and everything, it seemed very, very forced. Nevertheless, it still never took away from the joy of the movie. Speaking of also things in the movie that I'm also talking about a couple of surprises. The ending was a very, very major surprise, but a fitting one, because we're going to see how everything in the end played out and what's going to happen with the Guardians going forward. I already know it set up a lot. It did set up some things. It didn't set up anything too crazy, but it did have some things being set up. It also put it in a way for some of the people who said they may not return. There was rumors and speculation that Dave Bautista said after this movie he's not coming back as Drax, only because he said he doesn't want his Hollywood career and his legacy in Hollywood to be defined by just playing Drax. He wanted to do some more different type of better roles and bigger roles in other films. So with certain setups, they did set it up for if people didn't want to come back, then it was understandable and it was okay. And it was very, very fitting. Also, they definitely cursed a lot in this movie. It was a very, very major surprise. Like I did not expect as much cursing, but hey, they when they did it, they delivered. And some of it, of course, was like really, really shocking. Like it wasn't just you know the oh damn or anything like that. No, they dropped they dropped an F bomb in there. They dang near called people the B word and A word, however you want to look at it. But it really was overall, like I said, a very, very good movie. Is in Marvel one of the better trilogies. Like of course we have your Iron Mans and your Captain Americas and your Spider Man and things like that. But Guardians is definitely in that caliber of being one of the top five trilogies for the MCU. Now, where they're going with it after this, when it comes to Guardians and the rest of the MCU, and by the way, from what I seen, there was no what is it called in credit scene that was like a crazy, crazy spoiler, or not even really crazy spoiler, but one of those. This was a fitting end for this trilogy, and the end credit scenes more so did not focus on, hey, let's set up Kang is messing with the Guardians now, or Kang is doing this over here. No, this was a Guardians movie focused with a Guardians villain and just a Guardians end, and it was a very, very enjoyable movie. If I was gonna give it a rating, 8 out of 10 when it comes, especially when I compare it to the rest of the MCU movies. Like I said, High Evolutionary, man, he was a villain. This was whoo, and it was some things that I sat back that he did so subtly that it just man, he's a villain that we will probably talk about for a while. And when I say a while, I'm talking about when it comes to the furtherance of the MCU. Of course, we're gonna have our diehard favorite beginning stages and Infinity War era villains such as Thanos, Killmonger, Whiplash. We have so many different villains. Wow, we do Ego the Living Planet. Ooh, really great. Vulture from Spider-Man 1. Bucky, technically. Like, we have a lot of good villains, but I feel like High Evolutionary, maybe. I wouldn't try to. I would need to see it again to really, and look at the other movies again to really decide if I'm going to catapult him into the top echelon of villains. Probably not. But nevertheless, for people that were looking for a glimmer of hope for the MCU, because a lot of fans have not been happy with the MCU recently, I included. But any fans looking for a glimmer of hope pertaining to the MCU, this movie definitely did deliver. And for those that have watched The Guardians and wanted to see a movie that doesn't have to do with all of this variant, timeline hopping, X, Y, and Z, future MCU projects movie, and just wanted to go see a Marvel movie and just enjoy a Marvel movie, I believe this is the best out of the bunch. But that is all I'm going to talk about for today. Hopefully, I'm probably going to get some of my friends round up so we can do a actual spoiler breakdown and where we think things are going to happen with the MCU, and talks about pros and cons dealing with the MCU. But nevertheless, that is a topic and a video for another day. Please, this is not a paid advertisement, just to let anybody know. Please go out and see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Again, very, very great movie. Very great superhero movie, especially. especially of this year, until we get things such as Flash, Blue Beetle, the Marvels, and I believe Aquaman comes out the end of this year. And we'll see what happens with them. Also, let me know how you enjoy the solo short form videos. I'm going to try to do these a little more, especially when it comes to some of the movie reviews. So that way we can have the shorter ones for people who are trying to figure out if they want to see the movie or not, as well as the longer ones where I get some friends and some other people to really, really dive into the movie and what we've seen, Easter eggs possibly, and things like that. But that's all for today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this with your friends. And I'll see you all on the next one.